Hey everybody, this is Name Your Game, a video game podcast brought to you by SharcTank.com. Each episode we bring on a new guest so we can talk about their favorite video games from the past and the present. I'm Tim.
And I'm Dane.
And with us we have Brett Cutler, a game designer from 17-Bit Games. How's it going, Brett?
Going pretty good.
Right on.
Pretty good. A little bit hot this week, but otherwise things are nice.
Yeah, as far as I understand it, we're all from the Seattle area.
Yeah. Are you originally from here, born and raised?
No, I moved out from Michigan. Moved out for school. Just hitched up all our stuff to a minivan.
Wow.
Drove it straight across Idaho. Ugh, Idaho's kind of nasty in the middle of the night. But yeah.
Nice.
Where'd you go to school then?
I actually went to school at DigiPen. So,
Okay, very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, DigiPen is actually located in the city that we currently live.
Yeah, we live in Redmond, so...
Okay, so Redmond, where everything shuts down at 9 p.m.
Yeah,
Kinda.
exactly.
Yeah, it's a little bit Pleasantville over here.
Yeah, it's so weird because when we first moved here, shortly after we moved here, I got a dog and I started walking him, and it was like Friday night at 9 p.m. and I was walking him along a street and it was deserted. There were no cars. I was like, what the heck is this?
Even if the dog wasn't with you, you'd still feel kind of safe.
Yeah.
But there's like 40,000 Microsoft employees who work there, and you know, a lot of them have to be engineers. And my understanding is that engineers like to work late in the night. I'm kind of surprised that everything, like, you can't get food anywhere unless it's McDonald's or something.
Yeah, there are a few 24-hour drive-thrus. Speaking of what you just said with the engineers working late at night, there's actually a building directly parallel to the apartment building we live in, and so my window is parallel to the windows of that building, and there's a software company in that building, and so it'll be really late, like 12, 1 a.m., and I'll be looking out my window into some of the windows there, and there'll be lights on and people in their offices working. It's nuts.
Dude, you're gonna steal their source code.
You just gotta get a microscope. Anyway, telescope. That's what I meant, not microscope. That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, Brett, I had a question for you.
Sure.
What is your favorite game of all time?
Video game, by the way.
It's really mean to ask a game designer.
Oh, man.
Because you have to both hate and love everything.
Sure.
Okay, let me rephrase that question. What's one of your favorite games that you want to talk about right now?
Let's go with Pathologic.
Pathologic? I've never even heard of that.
Pathologic is, I guess it's about 10 years old now. It's a Russian first-person adventure game.
What platform? PC?
PC, yeah. Came out by a studio called Ice Pick Lodge.
Okay.
It was their first game, and since then they've done The Void. They did something that came out last fall called Knock Knock. But they kind of specialize in like literary horror type of games.
Okay.
Pathologic is about dealing with the plague in a mid 19th century Russian steppe town.
Awesome.
Interesting.
So you said a first-person adventure game. So
yeah,
the adventure aspect, is that kind of in the like puzzly aspect of like point-and-click adventure?
It's in the nature of the tasks you do, in that it's not really... I mean, when we talk about adventure games, I'd kind of define the genre as a game where you do things to express a narrative, as opposed to the mechanics being the main part of the game.
Okay.
A lot of times we use puzzles to give it like more meat on its bones, so that you feel like you're doing more stuff. But a lot of the modern adventure games, like Walking Dead, you know, we stripped away a lot of the puzzles because that tends to block a lot of people on the aspects, when what you really want is to feel involved in a narrative.
Right.
I gotcha.
So in Pathologic, you've got a couple basic actions you can do. There's a little bit of gunplay that's terrible.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. There's survival horror mechanics, like you can get sick, you're running out of food, you need to sleep.
Nice.
But a lot of what you're doing is walking around this town, which has maybe 1,000 people in it, doing kind of picking up quest threads from the different people and following them through. So you'll talk to somebody and they say, hey, I'm having this feud with somebody else. I need you to go here and do this. And as you go along and do it, you learn more about the people in the town. You're kind of making the decisions that really determine who lives and who dies.
Wow. So your decisions have a lot of weight?
In a lot of ways, it's your performance has a lot of weight, because it's really, really hard. And it's hard in a way. I haven't actually beaten the game, because it's getting its point across super effective.
Sure.
Without even getting to the very end. So as you go, it's all about dealing with this apocalyptic plague. There are these noble houses that you talk to that don't believe anything's going to go wrong. and you're kind of digging through their past, figuring out what they're hiding. But as the days progress, things start to get worse and worse and worse. There's an outbreak in the slum district.
Sure.
You kind of have to go down and investigate, and it's almost like David Lynchian horror. You go into this house that the house itself has started rotting, and when you go inside, the whole air is red. There's this incredibly oppressive atmosphere, and as you stay inside, the people who are incredibly sick kind of rise up as zombies and attack you. And you're going in there to pick up supplies, to pick up medicine, to learn more about how to stop this disease.
Sure.
And get out of there. But you can get sick along the way. And then at the end of every day, you go to sleep if you can, and when you wake up the next day, they tell you how many people have died in the past day, how things have deteriorated, and how the conditions are kind of changing.
Sure. That sounds awesome. I can't believe I haven't heard of this game, because really it sounds right up my alley. You mentioned it's a little David Lynchian. I'm a huge fan of David Lynch.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have a few close friends who would also appreciate that game. I'm definitely going to look into that and see if we can kind of sit around it in the dark and give that one a shot.
Oh, man. Well, and it's super... it uses blunt allegory. Mm-hmm. This town is actually shaped like a butchered cow, and they divide the districts into...
Oh, I see.
Names like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like the cuts of meat.
Sure, like Angus and whatnot.
Yeah. And there's a giant slaughterhouse, and they hold these pieces. Like there are these huge buildings that you don't get to go in until certain parts in the game, and you're kind of wondering, like, the giant slaughterhouse also holds... I might be crossing my wires, but it's also the sanitarium.
Okay.
Everybody in town is kind of wondering where the children have gone. There's this spiral that looks kind of like a wasp's nest on the edge of town, where the children are all living. Mm-hmm. And it's supposedly built by a crazed architect who discovered new geometries.
So it sounds like there's a lot of mystery then in the game, and I'm assuming then that there's a bit of the appeal to continue to play is to kind of uncover some of those things. I'm sure there's a lot that the game introduces to you that you really want to find out, as you play through it.
Yeah, and especially because it presents these symbols so straightforwardly. Like, you can tell right away that there are pieces that are not really realistic. They're there in a symbolic way.
Sure.
As you go through, you start figuring it out. They have people dressed almost as plague doctors. They have the big beak masks.
Yeah.
Big robes, but they actually kind of act like extra narrative characters. They kind of exist outside of the story because they'll appear in places. So there are bits where early on, you arrive by train to this village, things start to go bad, and you can pick up a quest thread to actually leave early. Get out of there, save yourself. And when you go to board the train, the guy who you've been talking to is dead, laying dead in the grass, and one of these watchers is standing by the train, and he tells you cannot leave. This is within the bounds of this experience. You have to see it through to the end.
Sure.
They also stage things as though it's a play. So at the end of every day, there's a community theater, or there is a theater in the town.
Sure.
And you're encouraged to review the events that went on in the day. And the theater master kind of talks about it in an extra narrative sort of way also.
Kind of like he's critiquing the job that you've done, playing the character that you're playing, kind of like that?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, that's the kind of choices that you're making, which is you're within the bounds of the character. There are three main characters, and you're within the choices that character can realistically make, but you're expressing yourself. Almost like the way an actor can make certain choices on a script when they're doing theater. Yeah.
I see. So to go outside of essentially, it's almost like there's an intentional way that you should be going about things, but you can also go outside of that.
You can ad-lib,
so to speak, yeah.
Like there's narrower parts where the game is determining what your character's doing. And then there's wider parts where you have a certain level of inflection that you can add to it.
That's really cool.
And it's like a different way of doing player interaction. Because you can do the branching stuff where it really changes, like Mass Effect or Walking Dead. And the problem is that it's like inherently expensive. Like you have to generate content for all the branches, and then every time you branch again, you have to generate more content for every possible combination of things.
Sure.
And it's not really solvable unless we get to something where like AIs can start writing dialogue.
Yeah, for sure. I've thought about those types of scenarios myself.
Dude, Chris Crawford has spent 20 years of his life trying to fix it, and he hasn't.
Wow.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
But actually, Kentucky Route Zero does a similar thing, where you know, you have these choices of lines to say, but they don't actually affect, like, none of the other characters react to the lines you say. It's really reading to determine how you view the character.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that sounds like an extremely unique game. So what aspects of the game, I mean, you've really painted the picture for us in terms of what the game entails. What aspects of it appeal to you the most as a game designer? It's
unified, super tight between its aesthetics and its mechanics.
Sure.
On its most basic, on the surface level, right? It's about the way that society can collapse in the midst of an incredible trauma.
Sure.
And this is like classic survival horror stuff where the game is hard because the action is hard and you're constantly running out of supplies and freaking out about that.
Right.
And it's the sort of thing where if you stop playing, you don't want to keep playing because it's too tense. You're like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to save my medicine, how I'm going to save my food. You get sick and you're screwed.
Yeah, I could see Tim falling victim to that aspect of it. Horror is his least favorite genre.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of horror.
And it's that like long term. It's horror like when you don't have any money in the real world, which is incredibly intense, combined with like very specific horror too.
Sure.
They have supply shocks where the panic causes massive inflation, and things that you could buy the day before that cost 10, whatever the money is, now cost like 100.
Wow.
And so all your plans are suddenly screwed up because you can't even buy food for yourself.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a fun game. I'm going to want to check that out. You mentioned then, so that's your favorite game of all time. Is that correct?
I think it's the game. Let's say it's the game I respect the most.
Okay. That's right. You said that that it was an unfair question, that it's not necessarily your favorite of all time because you're a game designer.
I do have one question real quick, though. You said you haven't even finished the game, but have you spoiled and looked up the ending so you know how it ends, or do you still...
I don't actually know how it ends.
Oh, fascinating.
Which is crazy. I think that it actually has an ending that does unpack some of the mystery.
Nice.
But right now, the way it exists in my mind feels very similar to the way that... Like, I did a similar thing with Shadow of the Colossus, where I played the beginning 3 or 4 Colossi.
Yeah.
And then you can already see kind of the whole story from that point. Like, you see the characters deteriorating, bad things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the whole story of stolen power. I was actually more satisfied with the narrative of Shadow of the Colossus before the end.
Sure.
Like, when I stopped, and the character was still going on his journey.
Yeah.
Like his inevitable declining journey. That felt like a very suitable place. Like that's a very archetypal quest.
So it was more enjoyable for you to experience it that way than to play it through to the end.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the ending bit had to solidify it, right? Like, it had to explicitly state and show what he is, and by showing it, it removes it from your imagination.
Sure.
Yeah, endings are hard. It's hard to make an ending that is satisfying and also coherent.
Yeah, especially when they're so good at showing without saying.
Sure.
And, like the way Team Eco is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that they did, at the very least, accomplish with that ending was to kind of show you that it's possibly linked to their previous title.
Yeah.
And they didn't really, it wasn't like a solid message saying, hey, you know, this character is definitely has to do with the people in the other game, but they kind of showed it to you, they hinted at it, and then it's kind of up to you to make that decision. Or at least that's how I interpreted it, which I thought that at the very least, that is something that they accomplished with that ending, which, you know, was pretty cool. But I do know exactly what you mean, though, in terms of kind of leaving it up to your own kind of interpretation of where it's going, as opposed to having the message painted for you on the screen.
Well, and I think that depends on how much your story's about plot versus, like, mood and tone. Mm-hmm. Like, if you describe the plot of Shadow of the Colossus, there's not a lot that you do one thing 12 times and then something happens at the end.
Yeah.
And it's not like pieces that you're waiting to find out what happens. But they do have that driving mystery of what will happen when I get the last one.
Yeah.
But you can emotionally kind of tell it's not good, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess one question people might have is she actually going to come back to life?
Yeah. But that's not going to happen. Or if it does, like, something's going to go wrong.
Kinda, sorta. I mean, I did finish the game, so But I mean, I won't spoil anything for even if it's a very old game. But for anybody who's listening that hasn't finished Shadow of Colossus, that's one of my favorite games of all time. And I would recommend anybody play it to the end, especially since they redid it in HD.
It's so good that the frame rate is better.
Yes, absolutely. And they actually included 3D support for it. So I'm one of few people who actually makes use of their 3D television from time to time.
Is that pretty good with like the giant colossi?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, at the very least, there's a lot of like little bits, little ambient things like dust gets kicked up from the horse and it just kind of like floats in front of the screen. It's cool. Pretty cool. I like stuff like that. The subtle things that kind of help to draw you in, make it more immersive.
So Brett, we talked about Pathologic and how that's one of the games you respect the most, as you said it. What's a more recent game that has really impressed you, really blown you away?
How recent should we talk about? I mean,
as recent as you want to get.
The last few years, I'd say.
Last few years?
Yeah, maybe last 5 years.
Oh man, that just puts Mass Effect 1 out of contention.
You can. It's okay.
Yeah.
You can say Mass Effect.
With a previous interview, we had a whole discussion about the Mass Effect series as a whole.
So yeah, you can kind of encompass the series together.
Mass Effect is interesting.
Sounds like you prefer 1 though over 2 and 3.
I really do. And
good.
like,
So does I.
I have a lot of respect for 2. Really don't like 3.
Sure.
But like 1 is way up there.
3 is weird because there are some moments in 3 that were just like brought me to tears because that had more to do with my investment in the characters it was referring to as opposed to,
Sure.
But there are some parts like Morden's arc, the end of Morden's arc, or the way I ended Morden's arc. I assume it can go differently.
Sure.
And certain things that brought me to tears, but there are other parts of the game where it was just so mediocre.
Yeah. I would agree with that too. I mean, I think for the most part, I enjoyed Mass Effect 3. I think that there's no use talking about the ending anymore. I think everybody has talked about the ending to death.
Yeah, that I would still get angry talking about the ending.
But yeah, I think there were certain parts of Mass Effect 3 that just blew me away. Were incredible, had me feeling very emotional. But it's hard not to get that way when it's coming to the end of this epic 3-part, sci-fi series that I think a lot of us were really taken away with.
So Brett, what about? I mean, there's Mass Effect. If you're a fan of the game, it's got so many different things going for it. What particularly about Mass Effect really impressed you?
So I'm gonna say the Mako driving that around. Oh yeah.
Is that sarcasm?
But actually, no, actually it's not. Although it's kind of silly to say. So I feel like the first one was this giant collection of everything they wanted to do to get something kind of very Star Trek-y in a big adventure RPG.
Right.
And so that includes like exploring undiscovered worlds, taking out strange encounters, the hero story where you chase down the bad guy through the galaxy. And it was these weird, unpolished bits that actually fulfilled a lot of the fantasy that I had. Like the fantasy of landing on a planet, it looks like some sci-fi painting. Sure. And you're going to go around and explore it. You're maybe the first person who's walked on this planet ever.
Yeah. Me personally, that's one of my favorite things too. I really liked going, and I understand that the physics on the Mako were kind of weird, and like you said, it's a little unpolished, maybe more than a little unpolished. But
did you see the shirt they sold?
No, I didn't.
Was it sold officially by BioWare?
Yes, they had a T-shirt that said official like Mako exploration team, and it was like a road hazard sign of the Mako driving straight up, like straight vertical.
Nice,
that's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, so what I was saying, I understand that it's not perfect, but being able to go down on the planets and just drive around or explore the planets, to me that was breathtaking. And in Mass Effect 2, when they replaced that with the probing, I cannot put into words how angry that makes me. Like, I loved driving around in the Mako, and some people didn't like it because of the flaws, but it was so... It was just so whimsical and filled me with wonder, and I loved it, and I was so depressed when they took that out of 2. Despite the the other improvements that they made in Mass Effect 2, I think
it was all like very conscious too. They very specifically, and you can see them doing this throughout the game. They looked at everything they did, every decision they made in the first game, and they went, "Was this a good decision? Did people understand it? Was this core to what we want to do, and they cut out all the stuff that wasn't as good.
Sure,
and,
sure.
And so, like, 2 is super tight.
Yeah, well, I would say that it's streamlined.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's kind of the word that I use to describe experiences like that, where it's sort of a sequel or a successor to another game, and it just seems like they wanted to cut the fluff, but they maybe cut it too much.
And I think that definitely happened in the third one. Like, they cut it to the bone.
Oh, yeah.
Because I really felt like all I'm doing is fighting. And I've been playing in this combat engine. Like, they did it really well in 2. The upgrades to 3 aren't super meaningful. And I'm just
compared to 2, no, they're not too different.
Yeah.
I honestly don't even remember what the upgrades were between the combat system from 2 to 3, but maybe that's just because I only played 3 the one time. I don't know.
It's like, the feedback is a little bit better. The guns feel a little bit nicer, but it's still not, like, in the class of a strict shooter.
And I think they changed how you use your heavy weapon and weapon upgrades and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Did they have grenades? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think they had grenades in all 3.
They were different. Like, the first one had the special things that you could throw, and they did a lot more damage.
Yeah, you slide them on the ground, don't you, in the first one?
I think it's like a
slide
disc,
them towards your foes. Yeah, it's like a disc.
Yeah, that does sound familiar.
It's like a Roomba.
I thought the main difference between 2 and 3 was 3 had the Omniblade, right?
That's true.
Oh, that too,
I didn't think about that.
Was that specific to 3?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
They always had, like, the Omni gear or whatever.
Yes. No, now I remember.
But it was in 3 where they made it a blade, and it reminded me of the sword from Halo.
Master Chief Spartan Sword. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was a little bit different, but yeah, I think that was part of their advertising for 3 as well. And they had
which is kind of weird.
Blades at PAX.
I don't really understand that. Like, it made him edgier and cooler. But I mean, they did it, like, it helps a specific situation. I mean, it helps to have melee because it solves that weird situation where you're really weak when somebody gets up close, and it takes you, if you're really, really close to a guy, it's really hard to aim at him because they move too fast.
Especially when it's a over-the-shoulder kind of situation as opposed to first person.
Yeah, I don't think I actually really use the Omniblade.
No, and like ideally you would stay far away.
Right, yeah.
It's a cover shooter,
One thing about Mass Effect 3, though, I did like the team-based multiplayer that they threw in, which, I mean, it wasn't a fantastic, multiplayer experience compared to other games that are more focused on their multiplayer, but it was just kind of nice for it to be there. I was really surprised that they actually managed to put that in, and I had a lot of fun playing it with friends, just because it was a way to enjoy the combat system of Mass Effect 3, which is one of the best parts of Mass Effect 3. With friends, and
they did a good job.
I liked that. Did you play much of the multiplayer?
I played a decent amount on. I think the enemies are like. I think the big weakness compared to something like Gears of War is that the enemies aren't quite as interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. And you run out of. I mean, once you've fought Geth and Reapers, and once you've fought all of them a number of times, it's like there wasn't really anything else they could throw at you. They couldn't just create a new race of enemies that wasn't in any of the single player to throw at you in multiplayer, so you really just kept having to fight the same units, and that was the worst part.
But their upgrade system was really nice.
I was about to say I liked the booster packs. That was really fun, especially as a fan of collectible and trading card games.
Well, and they were able to solve like a big problem with it too, where like with like Magic, you open a pack and you have more commons and you get duplicates of the stuff that you already have, and so like the more packs you buy, the less value each one is.
Right.
Sure.
And in this, it's a digital thing. They can like upgrade your cards if you get duplicates.
Right.
So every card you get is valuable.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Hearthstone? The digital card game from Blizzard. Yeah, so they did a similar thing with the crafting system, so you can just destroy them and then use that to craft a card of your choice. I
think it's something you got to do, because you got to make that bit where you just gave them money. They want to make that as enjoyable an experience as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it gets to the point where I played Hearthstone for quite a bit. I got it, way back when it was in fairly early beta, so I've been playing it for a while. And it got to the point where when I get a pack, I maybe get one new card, but it's not uncommon for me to get a pack full of stuff that I end up disenchanting. So
yeah, it's too bad though. But I think Hearthstone they're gonna add new cards. They actually have the option, unlike something like Magic, of throwing in different booster variants. Like you could have a booster pack that contains sets throughout the years or something crazy like that.
Sure.
Yeah, and another thing that's nice with Hearthstone is that they can balance cards, because obviously if you print a card,
them?
yeah, exactly, tune them.
They can put out a patch that changes the way the card works.
So if it's overpowered, they can change it, as opposed to in Magic, there's cards that are overpowered and then they just ban them from tournament play.
Yeah,
that's all that they can do, because...
Have they done that yet?
Oh yeah, there's been several changes throughout.
Did they do something with Call of the Wild?
Call of the Wild, I don't think they've done anything with that. That's the
is that a druid?
That's a druid card. I think that's the
which
one is
that
that
makes druids super powerful, where you pump your guys and then you attack that turn.
I think that's the one that's like gives them all
or is
plus.
it a ranger card? No, what's the ranger one? There's like the ranger finisher.
The hunter.
Unleash the Hounds, maybe what you're thinking about.
Unleash the Hounds. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, they did.
They completely changed the way Unleash the Hound works. Now you get a 1/1 Hound with charge for every minion that the enemy has on board.
And it was still pretty overpowered, so they actually raised the mana cost of it recently. It's funny because it was overpowered before, so they changed it, and the new variation was overpowered in a different way, so they had to boost the mana cost. Yeah,
they've had issues with that card.
Yeah, for sure. Hunters were clearly dominating for a few seasons there. But
it's crazy that we run it like seasons that run out in like a month or two.
Yeah, their seasons are a month long, I'm pretty sure.
Yep. Yeah. And then coming up soon is the first
expansion. Yeah,
I think they're calling it an adventure pack. I'm not sure what they're calling it, but it's going to be pretty neat. The Naxxramas.
Yeah, it's going to be a single player hard adventure, like story mode almost.
Yeah. Are you familiar with World of Warcraft? Did you play any World of Warcraft?
Yeah.
So do you know Naxxramas?
Yeah, I played it for I think 6 months at launch.
Oh, okay.
It didn't have the staying power. I'm sure everybody has that story of like the first MMO they played.
Sure.
My first MMO was Star Wars Galaxies.
Nice.
Yeah, that's one of the games that I wish I had played.
Another member of SharcTank, Frank, and this is Dane, we played a ton of Star Wars Galaxies back in high school and really loved it, and have gone on to tell so many stories about it. So then our other friends who didn't have the chance to play it back then, like Tim, have heard of our adventures in Star Wars Galaxies. And yeah, I mean, the closest thing that I've seen to certain aspects of Star Wars Galaxies thus far with modern MMOs is in a game that we're currently playing, WildStar. There's a housing system.
Oh, really?
And WildStar's housing system is nearly identical to Star Wars Galaxy's housing system.
So they have like big empty planets and you can put stuff down on them?
Not quite. In terms of the confines of your house, it's a lot like how it worked in Star Wars Galaxy. So you have your own plot, and it's your own special island where your house gets to be.
Yeah, they're basically small little islands that are instanced, so that each person, and you can invite people. Yeah, you can make them open to the public, that kind of thing.
Yeah, with add-ons, you can visit anyone's house on your server, which is really cool. And so when you're in your plot, you can actually set down your furniture. Any furniture that you've crafted or gathered, you can set it down anywhere you want. You can scale it to make it large, small, rotate it, and you can combine furniture together in creative ways to make it look like other things. And that's something we really loved to do in Star Wars Galaxies, is creatively, combine a few panels or whatever to make it look like a flat screen TV and, all that stuff. And it's the first time in a game with player housing that I've really been reminded of Star Wars Galaxies in terms of how you can creatively set down furniture. But no, unfortunately, it doesn't have the same aspect where you can actually build your own cities on planets and stuff like that.
So is there a way to get an instance with multiple houses? Like, could a guild put their houses nearby each other?
Kind of, sort of. You can't, connect two plots together, so two people's kind of personal stuff are in sort of like a neighborhood. I'd love if they did do something like that, but you can creatively, you can set up buildings and things around your house on your plot to kind of create a miniature city. And I've seen ones like that, which are pretty cool. And you can have your guild meet in one person's plot. I don't know if there's a guild plot. I'd actually have to look into that, because I've only been playing it for a month or so.
That was a really good part of Galaxies, where we were building our town and building, at a certain level you can pool your money and build the bases that are defended by NPCs. Yeah. And then the rebels would attack, and no matter where we are, we get a call, and it's the rebels are massing for a big attack. We all come in, people start buffing everybody, and then we chase them around. There's like 40 or 50 of us chasing them around.
Yeah,
that was good stuff.
No, for sure. The Star Wars Galaxies had a lot of really cool, really unique things about it that just have not stuck around. I mean, World of Warcraft came out when Star Wars Galaxies was, had already been around for a little while, and from that point forward, LucasArts even tried to change Star Wars Galaxies to be more like World of Warcraft, and then it died.
Did you play it after they changed it?
I didn't, but a few friends of mine kind of tried to stick around.
Yeah, I mean, it was that thing where there was almost no authored content in Star Wars Galaxies.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time not really doing much in that game.
Sure.
Which I definitely wouldn't have the patience to do, or at least the time to do right now.
Right.
Yeah, that's my biggest problem with MMOs these days. Is to make it worth my time, I gotta always be doing something. But there's just that intrinsic part of MMOs where you're just hopping around floor tiles in the bank, or you're just kind of talking to people, or it's tough. It's tough.
I think that has to be that's a problem that has to be solved. I mean, MMOs have kind of creatively stagnated since World of Warcraft. I feel like World of Warcraft's big innovation was easing the barrier to entry, making it so that you don't have to group all the time. And a lot of times, up until that point, that was a design law, because everybody knew that it's most fun when you get other people, so you have to punish people when they're not playing with others.
Yeah. EverQuest and Final Fantasy XI are good examples.
Yeah, EverQuest. I remember when I played EverQuest back in the day, and you have to start grouping at like level 4. You literally cannot solo after that point. And to me, that was a huge letdown, because I only knew 2 people who played, and we weren't online at the same time, and it was tough. Yeah,
it's if somebody could be. I feel like World of Warcraft didn't necessarily solve that as much as kind of allied the problem. There's the high level raid content. But that's only a small slice of getting players to interact with each other. And it's the only really successful part that actually gets players to interact with each other in that game. Like in Star Wars Galaxies, there's all the other things people can do together, like build a city together.
Sure. Yeah, I know Guild Wars 2 tried to get people to play together by having events going on at all times, real-time events. So
you get those pickup groups,
Sorry,
you get the pickup groups and stuff.
Sort of. Well, yeah, there'd be an event that starts up where it's there's a whole bunch of our allies, and they're trying to move these materials from this mine over to the town, but there's bandits trying to raid them, or, stuff like that. And you were encouraged to all run over and all help and kill the bandits at the same time, and it would actually, auto-party you together for the duration.
Huh.
Yeah, they were called dynamic events, if I remember correctly, and they were based off of the public quests back in Warhammer Online. I don't know if you ever played Warhammer Online.
I did play that, and I remember getting those.
Yeah, sure. I really enjoyed the public quests in Warhammer. In fact, that was probably my favorite thing about Warhammer Online.
So, did you make friends out of that? Would you start talking to people after those?
That's a good question, and that's probably the best question to ask when it comes to using that as an example for the sorts of things that link you up with other people.
I feel like that was one of their goals,
Sure.
Let's get you doing stuff.
Yeah, I feel like if the event is pretty complicated, but still shows you what you need to do or what each person's role is to get it finished, then I could see there being scenarios where you work really well with someone that you've never played with before, you complete it, and you might want to talk to them and say, wow, that was awesome, good job, your tanking was great, that sort of thing, and then talk more, or you did that so well, and I don't know enough people who are actually good in this game and reliable, so maybe we should friend each other. And I have had those sorts of situations in games, but yeah, they're kind of few and far between. Usually I only interact with the people that I know closely.
Yeah, I think the problem is that, like you said, World of Warcraft did a good job of lowering the bar for entry, and the problem with World of Warcraft is they kept setting that bar lower and lower and lower and lower. Like in the vanilla game, you could solo and it was easier, but it was still at the end game, it was still tough.
Yeah.
Now there's if you do the heroic raid content, that's still difficult, but even then it's you can do 10-mans or whatever, so you still can kind of stay within your social circles.
Sure. But at the same time, though, it's tough for the developers themselves, because obviously they want everybody possible.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That because now, admittedly, I didn't play that much of Guild Wars 2, but I did play it, and I felt like the dynamic events were almost too easy, because it seemed like it would be a weird transition, because the thing is, the dynamic events are just that. They're dynamic. They just spring up in the middle of a questing zone. So if you're just questing in that zone, suddenly this big thing starts happening. You're involved whether you want to be or not at times, you know what I mean? But generally you do want to get in because you get rewards for it and that kind of stuff. But the thing is, it had to be a smooth transition between solo questing and suddenly this thing pops up. What am I going to do? They couldn't force people out of that questing zone because they weren't good enough or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right. So they had to make it easy.
It still had to be easy enough that it wasn't too intimidating and didn't force people out. So all of the dynamic events that I did, even ones, I think one was like probably launch day or day after launch or whatever, and it was like probably 30 people involved in this big event. And all I was doing was spamming AoE spells the whole time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there wasn't...
Right.
It was... okay, that one's not a good example because that's like that was still in like the newbie zone, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So it was still, you know, okay, this is the easiest one you're going to encounter.
What I can say is I got to max level in Guild Wars 2, and they do get really hard in the final zones. But I mean, that you could be compared to World of Warcraft, where it gets hard when you're doing raids and you're doing
heroic
level.
instances and whatnot.
Yeah, I guess it's a tough one to crack.
Yeah, because you're balancing what people actually want at that moment.
Yeah,
exactly.
Some people might not want this, some people might want it.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, moving forward, so we mentioned that you're a game designer, and you've obviously answered, you know, most of these questions and kind of looked at a lot of these kind of situations from the perspective of a game designer. Why don't we talk about the game that you're currently designing?
Okay.
What's the name of the game that you're designing, and what type of game is it?
So, we here at 17-Bit are working on Galak-Z. Galak-Z is a throwback to old 80s anime. It's a 2D shooter, but it's built not from the old template of shooters, but from kind of a modern reinterpretation of it. So we've got smart AI, we have real sticky situations that you can get yourself into where you might find yourself outmatched, you kind of have to run away, reassess the situation, approach it from another angle, and we've got smooth controls for kind of paramount to it.
Sure.
So a lot of the way we started, we started prototyping this actually about 2 years ago now, started from the controls. We wanted a ship that felt like it was really nice to fly.
Sure.
So the controls are oriented around using the shoulder buttons to do your thrust, your reverse thrust, your boost. Very similar to a racing game.
Nice.
Sure.
And then you kind of point the direction you want to go. So it's actually, in that sense, it's more descended from Asteroids than from one of the scrolling shooters.
Sure.
Hopefully with a smoother feel than Asteroids.
Yeah, just a little bit. Maybe a little more modern than Asteroids.
I think, if I'm remembering it, because Asteroids was based on the first, you know, what people usually consider the first computer game, which was Space War.
Space War, yeah.
Yeah. And Asteroids was like a cut-down version, but I think when I was looking at footage of Space War, it actually ran at a much higher frame rate than Asteroids.
Interesting.
And it was a lot more complicated, too.
Was Asteroids simplified specifically to make it more accessible then?
I think it was for hardware, like processing reasons, because I guess it was a supercomputer from 20 years earlier versus an arcade machine.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because, like, Space War was two-player, there was a black hole affecting your movement all the time, so, like, the players were getting pulled toward the center, and even shots would curve around the black hole.
That's really cool. For the first computer game of all time, it's nice to know that there were a little bit more in the way of those design mechanics.
Yeah, it wasn't just Pong.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. But, you know, in relation to Galak-Z, obviously then this isn't just your standard scrolling space shooter. You actually, it's a little less linear than that.
Yeah. So I like to think of it as being like Far Cry, in that you're inserted into a mission, right? You launch out of your mothership, and they say, okay, today's mission is going to be destroy the satellite they're using to kind of track our position. So like, okay, say it's in this big asteroid that's got this cave network kind of burrowed out of it. You'll go into the mission, and you're in the outer regions. There's like an asteroid field around this really big asteroid. You can kind of check out your map, look at what you've got coming up, and then there are enemy patrols kind of going around. Similar to in Far Cry, you can see guys on vehicles kind of roaming the land. It might not be a super important scrap, but it kind of get ready, get started for what's going to happen. And then as you go in, you're delving deeper and deeper into this cave, which is really a dungeon, and finding these pockets, like small bases of enemies. And similar to Far Cry, you can use a little bit of stealth when you want to start a fight. You can ambush them from behind, maybe take out a couple of the guys on the outskirts so that they don't go and report to the other guys, because they will report, grab reinforcements, come back and punch you from behind.
Sure.
And then you're trying to pick at them where they're weakest, because because we do sometimes throw it as this is a situation more difficult than you should be able to handle. And in a similar way, if something goes wrong, if the situation gets too hard, you run away. Maybe you find a different faction. We've got Imperials, the nasty blue-blooded guys, kind of like the bad guys from Voltron.
Sure.
That are always going after you. Those guys are always on the hunt for you specifically. You've got secret stuff that they actually want. There are pirates that kind of live out in the void. Like they're these scrappy guys. They like to take on anybody, but they look at you cross-eyed and they're going to start shooting. But the pirates hate the Imperials. See, if you get attacked by the Imperials, you can run away, find some pirates, and start a fight between the two. Well, you duck into the corner. You let your shields regenerate. Maybe you find some health and you get right back into it.
That's awesome.
And then there's all like the bugs. There's stuff that lives in here, and that stuff just kind of eats everything. And so you can play all these sides against each other, just kind of to get to your advantage.
That's really cool, and especially for a space shooter. I mean, the thing that fascinates me the most is that you've already made these sorts of comparisons. Far Cry, or you go into a dungeon. You wouldn't really expect to hear those things from a space shooter because you don't really look at it in that perspective like you would the types of games that you would compare to Far Cry or the types of games that have dungeons in them.
It's weird because it felt very natural as we were doing it.
Sure.
Like we wanted, Super Metroid was a big influence on us. That feeling of going into these alien caves and kind of digging stuff out and a more adventurous feel.
Yeah, I like how you described that the different enemy factions have different styles, different fighting styles and stuff, because I think that's a really cool thing to implement. I think a lot of, people think of shooters, I think they typically think of, I guess, Asteroid, which is asteroids are the bad guys. I mean, right. And then, or side-scrolling space shooters, which is just kind of like you're just kind to, or bullet hell games, where you're exactly, where you're focusing more on dodging bullets than anything else, you know what I mean?
Ikaruga, or, Zero Wing, which has the infamous meme.
Sure.
Just, bullets everywhere and bland enemy spaceships. But honestly, when you're, in my opinion, when you're building something in a sci-fi universe, especially in an original sci-fi universe, making sure to flesh out the different factions as well as the styles of ships that they use. I mean, that's a huge part of it, making sure everything is unique and kind of tells its own story just by the way it looks or how it's unique visually.
So you mentioned it was had like an 80s anime style, right? So how does that come into play?
Like Robotech?
Oh, Robotech, yes. Macross, if you want to be Japanese about it.
For sure.
There's a lot of Battleship Yamato or Star Blazers in there.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff. Like Jake's library of anime art reference is enormous. And we actually spent a big part of the beginning of this project collecting resources, like watching old anime, grabbing clips of explosions, of missile fire, of sound effects, and like, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Doing
there are these
good
folders.
research.
Yeah. There are these folders with like gigabytes of just explosions that.
Gigabytes of explosions.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Oh man.
We managed to filter them down into a small artful explosion. Well, we took them and we gave them to like our effects artist, and it's like, here's what explosions should look like.
Sure.
And he did like an amazing job.
That's awesome.
So that kind of defined the art style. That influenced our direction, and a lot of it is kind of going back to first principles of those shooters. Like those shooters were heavily based on the anime of their time. But because of technological limitations, because of like the production resources they had, because of the genre conventions of the day, they turned into this strict setup. It's a scrolling shooter. Most guys die in like one hit. They're not very smart. They come in waves.
Right.
But if we had that same influence, but we made it knowing all that we know today, without any like preconceptions towards genre, what would we do? Kind of going in that direction.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that a lot because I think like back in the day, like what was that game? There was a game on the NES I played a lot, and it was actually like a World War II shooter as opposed to a space shooter, but it was the same. It was still a side-scrolling, top-down scrolling.
1942 was a big one.
I think it was called
then.
Tiger Shark. Does that
Tiger Strike maybe?
Tiger Strike? I know it had Tiger in the name. Anyway, the point is, to me back then, and I think the draw to those games was. It was cool because you were flying in a ship.
Yeah.
And but today you can fly in a ship in much cooler ways now, you know what I mean? So you have to you can't just make a side scroller, like you have to make it more than that because it's the the coolness of being in a ship is it's diminished over time. It has diminishing returns, so to speak.
I think it's definitely not as immersive. Like the way that genre of scrolling shooter works, I wonder if somebody will be able to break it out of, because it's definitely fallen into a niche of the people who play those games are the people who have been playing those games for 10, 20 years.
Yeah. They'll always have their core audience.
Yeah, and if you see some of the more modern, like, bullet hell games, they get ridiculous to the point where there's more bullets and laser beams and missiles, and there's more projectiles on the screen than anything else, you know what I mean?
Like, to use Ikaruga as an example, I mean, I think even then, even though Ikaruga was many years ago, I think it came out first on the Dreamcast, still, I mean, those types of games were already kind of becoming stale, and that game came with a fairly simple yet still very different mechanic in which you can change the color of the, I think it was like a barrier around the ship, and then that made it so that you shot a specific type of bullet and you could absorb a specific type of bullet.
Sure.
And even though it was kind of a small thing to add to a game like that, of which many others already existed, it was so different, and I think that's what really helped with that game's popularity. And so I think it really just takes kind of coming up with something unique about the game that isn't, I don't know. I'm not a game designer by any stretch, but I'm sure it's looked at as a puzzle. I mean, you can speak to that as a game designer. I'm sure coming up with that sort of, what can I do that will make this thing appealing again, I'm sure is sort of like solving a puzzle in a way.
Well, there's like, you can definitely come up with ways to twist your conventions, but I think you also have to be really careful of falling into the conventions that you already have.
Sure.
And a lot of that is invisible to us in the genres that we like. When you look at first-person shooters, we're probably fine with the way they go, but they started with stuff like Doom, where you don't even aim up and down.
Right.
And then as you add all these pieces, like, oh, now you can aim in any direction, now deal with reload, like, you weren't reloading weapons, there wasn't a use button.
Sure.
Vehicles are a new thing, and
even
all these pieces. Yeah. Can you figure out how to watch this cutscene? All these pieces have to layer on top of each other, and if you're there, like, the whole time, you already know the pieces, and then you're waiting for a new piece to get added, and so it's very easy for you to learn. But if you're somebody who's never done it and you have to jump in, and somebody hands you a controller and it's got 2 joysticks and 20 buttons, what's going on?
Right.
So Steel Battalion, is that what you're talking about?
Steel Battalion is like a celebration in excess, though. That's what's amazing about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
There's so many. When I first looked at it, I was so intimidated, but then I realized there's like a bunch of things that are just like, there's like 8 buttons that are not used other than when you're starting, just to start up the mech. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just like, okay, you got to flip these 5 switches and then flip it back. And then you press these buttons in this order, and then you start it up. And
yeah,
it's just like,
it's like it's too much, but that's the point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like a lot of what those buttons do is make you go, this is awesome, I'm playing a game that has too many buttons.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's very niche, but that, and that's probably why it didn't really stick around.
$200.
Yeah, that's
another. Well,
that's a fact.
Well, that's the weird thing, is a lot of super niche things that really appeal to very specific people tend to cost a lot, because they know this is right up this specific group of people's alley, and they're probably going to spend the money on it.
Well, it also has to do with manufacturing costs. When you produce a much smaller quantity of something, the manufacturing costs are usually a lot higher.
Yeah.
Plus, in the case of Steel Battalion, you're also manufacturing a lot more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That giant controller isn't going to be...
I used to work for a game store once upon a time, and we did have a few Steel Battalion controllers get traded in. And so I got to see how it was 3 pieces. There's the center piece and the left and the right piece. And they connected together with what looked like IDE cables or something very similar, like ribbon cables. Sure. It was weird.
Fascinating.
I was surprised at the kind of, I guess...
When I worked at GameStop, I remember a guy trying to trade it in, and the system was like, no, do not take this.
We'll never sell it.
There's a giant stop sign on the monitor.
That's funny.
Those are the sort of things I imagine where if you weren't worried about getting caught, because I'm pretty sure it's against the rules, it'd be very tempting to go kind of out back with that customer and say, listen, I'll give you $20 right now for this.
Yeah. No, I would do that. Sometimes people would bring in like Super Nintendo games.
Yes, that's the one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, a friend of mine managed to buy a copy of EarthBound from a customer for $1.
What?
Yeah, the guy was like, yeah, you know, I grabbed some of my brother's old Nintendo games. I need some gas money. Yeah.
That's the worst brother ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, producer's note. What a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still don't have a copy of EarthBound for Super Nintendo. I want one, but I just don't want to drop like 150 or however much people are asking nowadays.
I wish I could get into EarthBound. Have you played EarthBound, Brett?
Yeah, I like Mother 3 even more.
Yeah, I've played maybe the first quarter or so of Mother 3, and it's great. But I was playing it with some friends who were also big fans of EarthBound, and we had this pact that was like, let's play it together, and if we can't find time to hang out, we just want to make sure to wait until we're all together so nobody gets further ahead in the story. And so when I do things like that, when I make those types of arrangements, I never finish those things because you have to.
Yeah, I had to resort to illicit means to get it running on Game Boy hardware because the music stuff. Because it's got a music-based battle system.
Yes.
Where when you attack, if you push the A button in time to the rhythm of the battle music, there's like 150 battle music tracks. Mm-hmm. You can start doing you can chain hits. So it's like
yeah, that's really cool.
16.
Yeah. I loved that, and I actually had decent luck with that, even though I was doing it through an emulator on the Wii. I had homebrew on my Wii, which I'm not sure if I would be as willing to admit now if this were back when I worked for Nintendo, because I worked for Nintendo for a good while, and I recall like in the first couple weeks of training they had a whole thing that was like, here's what piracy is and here's why you need to understand it, here's why it's terrible and it hurts our business, and you need to make sure that you educate our customers, and so I actually had my DSi XL with like an R4 cartridge in it at that time, and I brought it home and I didn't bring it back.
Yeah.
But
they have like a sad Mario sticker they put on your forehead and then they escort you out the building.
And now it'd be the Luigi death stare.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I waited too long to give EarthBound a try. I think when it was an interesting game and I just couldn't get into it. I don't know.
It has so many music references. Like
there's
and that appeals to me. I don't know. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get it. Like I bounced off it a couple times playing it on emulators.
Sure.
But it really I think deals with nostalgia, and EarthBound is kind of both a celebration and a critique of it, where Mother 3 takes a hard line against it. Yeah, especially with the boss of Mother 3. Like, Mother 3 is, here's good stuff. Remember your mom, because that's a good thing to remember. But don't remember the garbage from your childhood, because that's just silly.
Yeah, no, it's for games that are so goofy, like at a distance, they just look silly and even a little basic. The themes that they manage to put in there.
It's kind of sparse in EarthBound, right? Because there's enough quirky stuff and enough, there aren't long speeches or anything, so
sure,
it is kind of harder to pick up on, especially when it took me a while to understand the art too, because the art it's almost like an amateurish style, but I think it's meant to look, it's very simple and unprepossessing and kind of it's kind of naive, right?
Yeah,
like this is what a kid would draw a town like.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. But and the guy who makes those games isn't actually a game designer. He's an actor.
Although I guess he is, because he made those games.
Well, yeah. Sorry. Of course, he's a game designer because he made those games, but that wasn't initially.
Yeah, he's like a writer.
Yeah, he's a writer and he's an actor, and I guess he said in interviews that a part of the theme, I guess at least with Mother 2, or maybe the series as a whole. I don't remember, but I think
it's the whole thing. Yeah.
He's been through some trauma, and kind of puts that into those games. So it's really weird to think, and especially I guess when you look at the final boss and the final sequence of Mother 2, it does get a little freaky, I'd say.
That's good stuff. The fourth wall breaking is like my favorite thing to do ever.
Yeah, I love it. But anyway, so cool. We talked about Galak-Z, the SharcTank. I guess I wanted to say the SharcTank cast. That doesn't sound
right. Cast. What are we? Disney?
Crew?
Yeah.
We're all cast members.
Yeah, the
or
SharcTank.
Is it a gang? Do you guys like snap your fingers like West Side Story?
We should, absolutely. We're the sharks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know, the Shark Tank crew, we went to the Seattle Retro Game Expo, which was a couple weekends ago. Really, really loved it. We did a write-up on it on our site, so you can definitely see that there. But we got to see Galak-Z, and that's how we networked with Brett, and I really liked what I saw.
Yeah, the questions we were asking were for the benefit of the audience. We pretty much knew most of the answers beforehand after talking to Brett and seeing the game in person. I also was really impressed with what you guys have so far. I would have played it more if I was a console gamer, but until you get it on PC, I'm gonna struggle with it.
Yeah, the buttons on the controllers are a little too complicated for Tim.
That's right. Yeah, I need a flat board with 58 different keys on it. That simplifies it for me.
Yeah, I wish I actually sat down and played it, but I was worried that I was going to have to leave pretty soon, and so I had a lot of stuff to see there. But just even the style of it, I loved the expressions that the anime characters made. That was my favorite part.
Oh man, our animator is so good.
Yeah, I was really impressed with how it looked. And
yeah, well, my first impression of it as I walked up was, I don't remember that anime. That's one that I missed.
Wow.
And I think really that's obviously what you're going for. So kudos.
So we're nearing the end of our podcast here. So something that we do at the end of each podcast is we ask our guests a question that the previous guest came up with, and then we task you with coming up with a question to ask our next guest. It can be, but doesn't have to be related to games or video gaming.
As an example, the first question that was a previous guest had come up with was, what is your favorite moment in your life? What was your most memorable time in your life?
Yeah, just what was the best time in your life? And then there's been other things like, what TV show do you think
jumped the shark?
Yeah.
Or was canceled too early?
Was canceled, yeah. Went on too long before it was canceled. So,
stuff like that.
Our previous guest asked the question for you. So, okay, yeah. So this is actually perfect question for you as a designer. The question was, if you could have been the creator of any existing video game character, so if you went back in time and possessed the creator of a specific character, what would you have done to make that character different?
Oh, man.
And what character would you choose? May have left that out of the question, but maybe that was implied.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if there's a character that comes to mind that you thought, wow, they had so much potential, but this thing about that character just really ruined it.
Or maybe you just don't like Mega Man's arm buster. Maybe you don't like. Maybe you wish you had a bow and arrow instead.
Maybe you wish you had a 6-shooter.
Maybe you want him to be a cowboy.
Yeah.
The easiest thing to criticize in the world is Sonic.
Oh, that's a good one.
Straight up.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So there's all of the connotations that Sonic has in the 21st century internet. But there's also some basic stuff about his character where in those games you've got like run fast, go fast all the time. But in order to provide any sort of challenge, it's like, okay, here's traps in the environment, here's enemies. And then you hit them and you get hurt and you stop and you break your flow and you're not having as much fun anymore.
And you lose your rings. It's all about them rings.
The rings are really good, though, because the game is a lot easier than you think it is, because you can almost always pick up at least one ring.
Yes.
And
Right,
so you can almost always never die. But I really hate how frustrating getting hit and stopping is. It's the stopping that really bugs me. And I really want to find a way to keep him moving. And I've actually, I've played with this problem. I made a game where it's like a Sonic game where you can hold a button to turn invisible and fall through the walls. So while you're running, when there's a trap, you push the button and you have like an energy bar that goes down, and then you pass through the wall. So like, there's a couple shortcuts through the levels and stuff like that where you're about to get hurt, but you just hit it, bam, go through the wall, take a shortcut.
Sure.
Kind of repeated myself.
I could imagine a problem being that what if you were just standing there, or what if you were jumping, you kind of like went into the middle of a wall or something, or just straight into the ground or something.
Well, I imagine if you're inside of something though, when your power runs out, you probably die.
What I ended up doing is not letting it, like you'd let go of the button and it wouldn't let you, even if your energy ran out, you wouldn't recorporealize until you got out of the wall.
Sure.
Okay.
So you could fall through the floor super easily.
I could see that same mechanic being used for, simplified and used for like an addictive continuous, like a cell phone game where you're just trying to go as far as possible, like Cannibalt, except instead of jumping over pits, you are going through the walls at the precise time that you need to.
Or you could do like a combination of the two. You could jump and hit the button.
Yeah, for sure.
Could be like helicopter game, and it lets you get through those broken parts. Yeah, Flappy Bird. Nah.
Bleh.
Forget Galak-Z, Brett. You should work on this game.
So this was called Super Runaway.
Nice.
Named after the Venture Brothers.
Oh yeah.
Where the kids, oh my gosh.
Right.
They go, Super Runaway! And then they, run away.
That's awesome.
Man, it's funny because I've been watching this show with my girlfriend called Under the Dome. And
my girlfriend just finished reading that book. That's weird.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually didn't know it was a book when I first started watching it. Otherwise, I probably would have avoided it.
Yes.
Because it's based on Stephen King. And, I've never read his book, so I can't criticize his writing, but every adaptation, film or TV I've seen is his. I don't really like, but then again, I don't like horror as a genre, so that kind of...
Yeah.
Anyway, the point I was making is we were watching Under the Dome, and there's this... They keep referencing the Monarch, and there's monarch butterflies in the game. And every time I see it, I just go, a Monarch! And it makes me want... So I've been craving watching Venture Brothers lately.
I would love to watch Venture Brothers.
The Mighty Monarch.
Venture Brothers for me, my roommates used to watch it on occasion, and I would just catch bits and pieces, kind of coming through the living room or whatever. My ex-roommates, and so I really always liked what I saw, but I've never actually sat and watched any significant portion of the show.
Yeah, I watched like the first 3 seasons, I want to say, and that show was excellent.
Yeah,
I love that show.
We should start from the beginning. That'd be a fun one to watch.
I think I have the first 2 seasons on DVD. So.
Sweet.
It's good. It's weird because it gets like a little bit. Once they build a big enough world, and you see this in like the 3rd season, they have to start taking the world more seriously, and the tone of the show stops. It's like less silly.
They did that with Adventure Time as well.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, really? I haven't watched enough Adventure Time.
Yeah, Adventure Time gets to the point, and I don't mind this because for some weird reason, I really like when something that starts super silly, like Octodad is another example.
When they had the serious expansion.
Sort of. In Octodad 2, or I guess it's not Octodad 2, it's the
Catch.
The actual Octodad, as opposed to the initial demo.
Okay.
The first half of the game is super goofy because you're like, wow, I'm an octopus, but people think I'm a real dude, and I'm, it's really hard to control my tentacles, and it's really funny and fun, and then as you move forward, it starts to get really serious in terms of the story. There's backstory in terms of how Octodad met his wife, and it gets serious, and to me, I think that's hilarious. I like that blend of seriousness and goofiness because, I don't know, there's just something about it that appeals to me.
See, Dane and I are divided on this point because I hated the second half of that game.
And similarly, you've kind of lost interest in Adventure Time.
Yeah, I think Adventure Time just got a little too weird. Like it no longer became silly and fun. It became grotesque and bizarre, and that's not what I was looking for, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's for a show that's meant to be for both adults and kids. I feel like if I had kids, there are certain points in a show like Adventure Time where I would be like, ooh, I hope he doesn't ask questions about that.
Yeah, there are absolutely episodes of that show that I would not allow my children to watch, like until they were teenagers or something.
To me, it's not that crazy, but yeah, that show also gets to the point where they're like, man, we've got all this continuity, so we're going to have to keep running with it. And I'm sure from your description of Venture Brothers, it sounds like it's pretty similar.
Yeah, I think when I stopped watching was right around when they were starting to do that, because I remember that vaguely, but I don't have very vivid memories of that. But I do kind of remember the tone starting to turn a little darker, and then I just kind of fell out of watching the show. I don't know why. I really do want to go back and watch it.
Yeah. Brett, you picked Sonic as your answer, and you'd like there to be a way for Sonic to keep going, which I totally agree with. I'm sure every Sonic fan would agree with that. Now, you should try your hand at coming up with a good question for our next guest.
Who currently we're not sure who that is going to be. So
yeah,
I would say if you could take any game, a boss character in any game, and put him in another game, which character would you take and why?
What would your answer be, Brett?
Ooh, I would want to put the projectile throwing Ganon into a Mario game.
That's so weird. I was going to use Ganon as an example. And then you said it as I was thinking it.
Because you could do stuff like you could jump off of... You'd have to find some way to do that same reflection. And Mario's main ability is jumping, right? So you'd have to find a way to mirror jumping. Like you're jumping off of the light balls and bouncing them back at him or something like that.
Yeah, wasn't there at some point in some Mario game where there is some sort of projectile that you jump on and it switches.
Yeah, the Birdo's eggs. Well, is that what you're talking about? Where you jump on the egg and then you pick it up and you throw it back at
Yeah,
you pick it up in midair.
Yeah, that is awesome. Actually, the Birdo eggs, where you're riding on it, and then you. Anyway, I thought there was something where when Mario jumped on it, it changed directions.
I can't remember. And also, are we talking 2D Mario or 3D Mario?
Yeah, because he can kick in 3D, I guess.
Yeah, well, you can kick in the air and punch on the ground.
Yeah, you could punch it right back at him.
But yeah, no, that's a good one. And I was thinking that, I don't know why, the first thing that popped in my head was Ganon, who shoots the projectiles, and Link has to swing the sword at it. And so I was thinking, I wonder what other character would be interesting to see.
Man, I gotta finish. Have you played Link Between Worlds?
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta finish that game. That game was really good.
I've got to start that game. I've heard so many good things about it. I'm terrible because all these games were coming out while I was working at Nintendo, and I had discounts available to me and everything. But I don't know. I bought Fire Emblem Awakening. It's supposed to be like #2 game on the 3DS or whatever. Still haven't sat down and played it. Need to play Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. Need to play Link Between Worlds. I've got so many games I need to play.
Oh man, that Fire Emblem came out the same month as Skulls of the Shogun, which was our last game.
Right.
Skulls of the Shogun is very similar to stuff like Advance Wars.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
It was an inopportune time for it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Skulls of the Shogun. So it's like a tactical combat game then?
I saw little adverts for it at your booth.
Yeah, it's like turn-based strategy. You have a small number of units on each side, and it's set up so that like the goal of the game is that every decision that you make is really important. So you're not like moving guys across the board or kind of slowly building up your economy. You're specifically killing dudes and getting right down to it.
Awesome,
and there's stuff like when you kill an enemy, he drops a skull. If you eat a skull, you eat his skulls, and then your unit powers up, and you can like turn into level 2 forms and stuff.
Okay, and I imagine there's some sort of strategy in determining who you level up when and that kind of thing.
One of my favorite mechanics is there's a 5-order limit per turn. So no matter how many guys you have in your army, you can only move 5 of them a turn, and it tends to balance out 2 players. And so when you're looking at it and you can only move this guy and you're like, is it worth one of my super valuable 5 actions to eat a skull, to have him regain HP, get a little bit more max HP, maybe turn into a demon, versus attacking a guy? And a lot of the attacks, it's like 2 attacks generally kills a guy. So battles will swing back and forth really, really fast. Yeah,
I can see that happening. It kind of reminds me of Banner Saga, where the number, it's kind of like back and forth, side to side. It kind of balances out for the team. If you get really ahead and you've knocked out several of the enemy team, they get more actions per character essentially. So it kind of balances it a little bit.
That's a really tough part of strategy games where you don't want that moment where everybody knows who's going to win, but it's going to take them forever to actually achieve that victory.
Right, yeah. Kind of like a snowball effect.
Yeah. And the game's just not as interesting once you know that, but if there's still a lot of gameplay to go. So if you can do stuff like add mechanics to spice that up and like make reversals possible.
Yeah. Are you a tabletop gamer at all? Do you play any board games or card games and that kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, not as much as I should, but yeah.
Yeah, that's like the newer age board games. A lot of them have they pretty much have hidden scores, and then at the end of the game, you get points for this and this and this and this. So at the end of the game, if you played like Seven Wonders or Agricola or anything, any of the Euro games.
No, actually.
Okay, well,
it's an embarrassing thing to say, isn't it? I played a bunch of the German ones.
Yeah. They're great for pure mechanics because a lot of those games are just the theme is really thin and it's just all about those core mechanics. And a popular thing these days is making the scoring at the end so that throughout the game you don't really know what your score is, so it's still tense until the end, because there's games that don't do that, and then halfway through the game it's obvious one person is going to win because you can see the score and you're like, there's nothing I can do to catch up with that person.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of like it kind of drags on.
They even encourage you to, like, if you have cards in your hand that amount to points at the end of the game, to not let the other players know you have those, that kind of thing, because...
Yeah, hidden objectives. They'll have hidden objectives so they don't know whether or not you achieved this mission or that are worth so many points, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And I think that's like the design lesson we got from those European board games of, in order to, like, you can still make a fairly complicated game, but in order to make it fun for people of different skill levels, you have like comeback mechanics and some hidden mechanics like that.
Yeah, blue turtle shells, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, really, those are That's what that's for. Like, you can play Mario Kart with anybody, and they won't feel.
So this is what frustrates me about the blue turtle shell. It's only the guy in first place. Sometimes the guy who's in second gets hit with the explosion as well, but typically only the guy in very first gets punished. So the guy in 10th or 11th or 12th or 16th, whatever place, will screw over the guy in first, and then the guy in second is now in first and he wins. Like, it's a comeback mechanic, but
yeah, I'd say that the
bullet bill
mechanic
is
works
the
better
best comeback mechanic, I think.
I think so, and yeah.
The argument I always see in terms of against the blue shell is, if I did better than everybody else, why should I be punished? Because I did the best. And in Mario Kart 8, at least, they do include a few things that you could do to actually prevent getting hit by the blue shell by being even better than just doing the best, you know, because it's even harder than just maintaining first place. You have to either use a mushroom at the exact time that the shell's going to crash down, and you actually go right just barely ahead of the explosion, and you actually get out of it. And with Mario Kart 8's new replay mode, where you can easily do replays and upload them and that sort of thing, there are a lot of cool videos on YouTube showing that, like really epic, like baby Luigi on a motorcycle, just like blasting out of an explosion range, you know?
Nice.
And you can do that. It just takes really crazy good timing. And then there's also an item, and it's a little rare.
Horn,
it's kind of rare to get it, but if you get it and you're in first place, you may as well hold on to it. And yeah, it's a horn that you can use as soon as the shell comes down. And I think that's pretty cool, because then that anybody that says I shouldn't be punished for being in first can be told, well, if you're good enough, you can stay in first.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I'm a huge proponent of comeback mechanics, but a comeback mechanic should be benefiting the person who's behind, not
the person in second,
pulling down the person who's in front. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why they've kept, like, all that stuff they do for good reasons, but specifically the design of the blue shell does seem more punishing than it should be. And like, it's become this focus of, it's like, that's the lightning point that people attack modern Mario Kart on.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's tradition, maybe, on the part of Nintendo. And if there's anything you can say about Nintendo, even, you know, as sort of a flaw, like their greatest oh man, brain fart. What's the opposite of the word flaw?
Their greatest strength,
their greatest
and
strength.
their greatest flaw are one and the same, kind of.
Yeah, their tradition.
Well, they're bound, right? They have all these fans that are going to complain if they go too far making new stuff, or if they change too little.
I think they're getting to the point, though, where they're realizing we've already tried to do these things and we're doing really poorly. Let's go farther outside of the box than we're comfortable with and see if that actually will bring us reward. From what I can tell.
Like what?
The next Legend of Zelda looks like they're actually trying to make it different from previous ones, 'cause especially even Link Between Worlds, actually. They already, by allowing you to buy all of your items at the beginning of the game, as opposed to putting one in each dungeon, already that breaks convention.
I think they definitely stagnated with Zelda.
Anyway.
Yeah, we could ramble on forever about Zelda.
I feel like there are, like, I'm not entirely sure that Nintendo's taking a big, like, change in direction right now.
Yeah.
Because when Iwata first came on, like, you could see a lot of stuff. The DS was really crazy, and the Wii was even more different, and they spent a lot of time, and they were really good at getting new people to play their games. Like, the Miyamoto games of the late 2000s were Nintendogs, and all that stuff. And those they're not for us, but they're good at what they do.
Yeah.
But now they're being eaten on the lower end by all the mobile stuff. And so I think they kind of retreated to, well, let's get, you know, and I think they dropped the ball on the core fans on the Wii.
I have to say, though, that's true with the Wii. It was very, very, very focused on casual and third-party titles. But the Amiibo, the little figures that they showed at E3, man, I am probably going to get sucked into that. And I think that's a really good idea on their part, too. I think that's going to get really popular if they do it right, in the same vein of Skylanders. Was
Splatoon a Nintendo thing?
Yes.
Yeah, that thing looked kind of fun to me. Splatoon.
Yeah, completely original IP and a team-based shooter. I mean, that's pretty different for Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly. And it looked stylistically, it looked pretty cool. It reminded me. It almost seemed like they were trying to get that TF2 money. Yeah,
kind of. Maybe they'll have hats, or maybe it'll be different from hats.
So many hats.
Maybe it'll be like shoes or something.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It'll be real world hats, like real world squid hats.
Yeah.
Oh man, that'd actually be really cool.
Yeah. I'm sure somebody has already made one.
probably.
Oh my gosh, the internet is not forthcoming.
Okay. Awesome. So your question for the next guest was, take a boss from a game and put it in another game.
It's a good question.
That is good. Okay, cool.
So, yeah, I think that we can wrap it up now. It's been a pleasure. Good talking to you again. It was really cool talking to you at where was that place? Yes, yeah, Surge. There you go. I was like, where were we at? So yeah, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate you taking your time out. And
absolutely, yeah.
So where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, if they're interested in following both you personally as well as your
company.
team, your company.
Sure. So I am on Twitter at Brett A. Cutler. That's the same as my website, which has some of my older games. I had a game at IGF a couple of years ago. And then 17-bit is 17-bit.com. We also have a Facebook page, a Twitter page, all that stuff, and we're keeping people updated on Galak-Z. Galak-Z is, of course, at Galak-Z.com.
Nice. So this was Tim and Dane with SharcTank. And thanks for listening to Name Your Game. We work on several other projects here at SharcTank.com. That's Shark with a C, by the way, because for some reason Shark with a K was taken.
Yeah, I can't imagine why.
We're a nonprofit, volunteer-driven gaming and geek culture site based in Seattle, Washington. We do local convention coverage, let's plays, tabletop strategy, and game reviews, among a bunch of other stuff. Please like and subscribe if you want to support us in our work. And you can leave feedback through comments on YouTube, on our site, or you can email us at NYG, stands for Name Your Game, at SharcTank.com.
See you guys later. Thanks for listening. Bye.
See ya.
Sounded so genuine.
I got money, but not much. Oh, my Coach Z is disintegrated.
That's okay. We still have the occasional Homestar references that come about, just kind of here in the Shark Tank.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly it's Homestar. I think that beats
Homestar
Water.
Oh, who's that handsome guy? Oh, yeah.